experience is pretty massive. It does not just sit with product. In large organizations, it's everybody's KPI, but it's nobody's operating mandate. I strongly feel that a product decision or experience debt stops being a product problem the moment servicing teams have to compensate for it. If something breaks in a financial flow or a financial product, that really impacts trust. If you're making a transaction and your money goes somewhere else, or if you did not authorize a transaction but the agent made it on your behalf, I think the fear is real and it should be there.
Hi, my name is Jochem van der Veer. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called TheyDo, the journey management platform for business decision making. We raised over $50 million and are growing globally. Our enterprise customers include Ford, J&J, the Home Depot, and Pfizer. I mean, wherever you look, understanding customers is key to staying ahead. But in order to do this at scale, aligning so many different teams with the customer journey is incredibly hard, but it is possible. I really wish this podcast existed before we started our company because so many companies are organizing around journeys and there's so much to learn. So in order to share what I'm learning, what I'm hearing with our community, I meet with industry experts. And in my video podcast, I'm here to explore the world of business strategy, design, and journeys, customer journeys, to really get an understanding of how leaders are changing their way in their business. So let's dive into the show. I'm joined today by Ashna Singhania, product and innovation leader working across fintech and banking. She's currently a VP product management at Goldman Sachs. And before that, she spent a decade at American Express, building and scaling products across payment, lending, risk, and digital banking. And what makes her perspective interesting, why I wanted to have her on, is how close her work sits to customer experience and customer trust. She led 0 to 1 launches, which we're going to dig into today, and large platforms across global markets. And she spent much of her career navigating the trade-offs between speed, scale, and experience in highly regulated environments, which many of you listening are working in as well. So in her book, she's leading customer experience from a product perspective. So Ashna, I'm very excited to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here.
I want to start with like a spicy thing. Is experience part of product or is product part of experience?
Well, that's a loaded question. For me, I think experience is pretty massive. It does not just sit with product. I feel like customer experience in large organizations, it's everybody's KPI, but it's nobody's operating mandate. When something breaks in customer experience, the ownership rarely sits with one team, and it's not just product. It usually shows in the gaps between how the journey was designed, how decisions actually get executed. Product might design the flow, but engineering builds the system infrastructure behind it. Risk and compliance define the guardrails, operations run the execution, and then servicing handles the recovery when something goes wrong. But I often say that customers don't experience any of those functions separately. They do not experience our org charts, they experience the failure points as a whole organization. The way I think I identify ownership if something goes wrong is by tracing the friction back, usually starting with the user feedback, complaints, escalations, any drop-offs, any repeat contacts that they have to make with the servicing teams. And I think those are the signals when you roll out a customer experience, which tells you pretty quickly where the experience is breaking down, if at all. So I think it is shared ownership, to answer your question, across multiple different functions in the organization.
Right. I have some people saying like, hey, product is a sequence of experiences. Others say like, no, we're a digital product. So everything that people experience is inside of the product. But what you're saying is interesting. Like if I heard it correctly, it's like it's everyone's KPI, but it's no one's mandate, which makes it incredibly difficult to do this at scale, right? And you just gave a few examples of like the end-to-end journey where, it's just not product, it's not engineering, it's risk, it's compliance, it's all these different departments coming together to make a simple financial product, in your case, land in the customer's hands or be able to be used by a customer. So if it's no one's mandate and if it's everyone's KPI, it does sound that product plays a pivotal role in making that happen at where you are today. So what have you seen is actually helping to make that successful versus where the biggest misalignment happens between like the different silos in the organization? Like what is working, but also like what's the hardest part when it's not everyone's mandate?
I think aligning the teams is the hardest part. As you can imagine, in any corporate, each of these teams have their own set of priorities, right? Their own KPIs to meet, their own agendas. But then there comes the enterprise vision that there's a particular goal that we need to deliver as an enterprise, which is going to run our business, which is going to keep the lights on, which is going to delight our customers and ensure that we maintain that stickiness so that there's a repeat rate for our customers and they do not want to go to competitors. They want to keep using your products. Um, I think as a product lead, one of my core goals is to drive consensus across these multiple different teams where everybody has their agendas, but there is one North Star metric that I'm able to relay, which everybody relates with. For example, if I'm working on an onboarding product, then reducing the time to onboard, making sure that our onboarding speed is faster and we are doing it better than competitors is becomes everybody's mandate, everybody's KPI, whether it's engineering or it's compliance or it's operations. Now, the means to an end is a different story altogether. While I'm building a product, I make sure that I am bringing my partners in early on. We are designing it together. For specifically for financial products, I think risk controls compliance cannot be an afterthought. We do not get that luxury. So they are our core design partners from early on, from the get-go, right? To really understand the regulatory landscape, to really understand what are the nuances and what we can build versus what we cannot. So you definitely have your core teams across engineering, design, marketing, but compliance becomes a core part of it because I think trust is the main basis of any financial product that we roll out.
Right. So if I get it right, what you're saying is that from the business perspective, from the enterprise perspective, it's your job to translate any strategic goal that's coming top down into which North Star you can use that cuts across these different teams so that you have that shared mandate. But
Yeah.
I think what's more interesting what you say is like you're treating your business stakeholders, risk compliance, as almost like as design partners in making this happen. What
That's
about
correct.
customers? Because the mandate from the top can be, okay, we're going to go strategically after this goal or this is our direction. But now the whole landscape is changing, right? The whole commerce landscape, specifically in e-commerce, with agentic commerce coming up. Today, you're more in the B2B side, I would imagine. But what's your take on this? Like, how does that drive the strategic change in a big business where maybe the mandate is not coming from the top, but it's more like the market pull or push, if you will, in a different direction? How does that change the way you're translating customer goals and using North Stars and business design partners? Is it still the same, or do you take a different approach now? For instance, this is unfolding in real time.
I would answer that probably in two parts. First, I think it's always very important to be in tune with what your customers want and how are they liking your product. Is there an opportunity to make what you built better and keep iterating on the feedback? And I'm very big on that. I worked in environments where I've delivered products for core consumers, for small and medium enterprises. In my current role, I deliver products for large Fortune 500 clients as well. But at every point, the means to getting the feedback may be different, depending on the nature of the population I'm building for. But it is very important to get continuous feedback, whether it is directly from the customers itself or it is from the servicing teams, the operation teams, the sales teams, which are actually selling those products. I make sure that I'm always in tune with what the customers really want. Um, Now, in terms of the roadmap, when I think of it from a product lead, maintaining the roadmap, maintaining the priorities and the annual goals is one of my core responsibilities, no matter what team I'm on, product-wise, and no matter what organization I'm working for. Um, Now, I feel roadmap is not static, it's not stagnant, it's forever evolving. And different things inform what the roadmap priorities should be. It can be leadership mandates, it can be enterprise priorities, it can be compliance, risk, or regulatory requirements that come up as we work through these different product journeys. And then a very important part of it is enhancements that you make based on customer feedback. So I think I always go back, take a step back as a product lead. I revisit what I'm building. Do I need to redo my priorities? Do I need to include anything additional that my customers would want, which would deliver a better benefit for customers, or bottom line, which are servicing those customers? The second part of your question is the environment is really evolving, and how do we keep up? I think every day we identify some or the other advancement in technology in terms of how customers perceive new technologies, and how do we keep up with competition that's out there too. And I think with agentic commerce, AI, we as an organization too, and I think across all finance fintech organizations, we're trying to involve it as much as possible, include it in our product flows, so that we can increase automation, we can reduce manual workflows for our internal team servicing these customers. We can have I am a big believer and user of agentic commerce, where I love that I'm delegating the intent of making a transaction to an agent instead of doing it all by myself. But that also makes me feel very responsible as a product lead, because I think trust and consent is going to be a big part of how we design AI workflows. Because now the user is delegating the responsibility of making a transaction, or identifying spending behaviors, shopping for the user, to an agent, and they're not doing it themselves. So I think those user flows have to be very intuitive as we design them.
Where are we on the spectrum? I'm sure you've followed the Mold Book and Open Claw trajectory over the last few weeks, but
Yeah.
everyone's saying like it's too risky, it's too untrustworthy, but it will be there in what, a month, a year, 3 years?
Yeah.
Like, where are we on this trajectory? What is the pace of innovation that you're seeing? Like, what are you preparing your teams for?
I think it is very different for different product types. Finance, I think, would be a relatively slow adopter, in the sense that there are so many risk, regulatory, and compliance layers that we touch, that we have to be very mindful of how we are leveraging AI, how we are building that trust in our flows and in our products that we deliver to our customers. For example, if I was working on a social app and the engagement drops or the engagement is low, you can work on those features. But if something breaks in a financial flow or a financial product, that really impacts trust. If you're making a transaction and your money goes somewhere else, or if you did not authorize a transaction but the agent made it on your behalf, I think the fear is real, and it should be there as probably as an indicator, or as something that we are mindful of as we build these flows. We need to be very clear of what the customer is consenting for. We need to be very clear with our communications. We need to be very clear with awareness and education, so that the customer understands what are they authorizing us for and authorizing the agents for. And at the same time, we need to bake in thresholds. We need to be conservative to begin with any flow, right, of how these transactions are taking place. So I think it has started in finance. Every company is working to incorporate most advanced technologies across machine learning and AI into their flows. But there is definitely a sense of taking conservative steps. Speed is not top of mind. I think trust is top of mind for all of these financial institutions.
Yeah, and the other part is, like you mentioned, means to get feedback a little bit earlier, which I think is the other angle. Like, what customers want is not necessarily what they need, right? It's like the classic design imperative. But how do you make sure that your teams are not only focused on the feature aspect of that, like, because you get feedback specifically on this is not working, I don't like it, I want to use this in a different way, to really understand like the broader need, or like the broader customer journey? Like, how do you make sure that they're not losing track of what actually is needed versus like the direct feedback that's coming from customers?
Yeah, I think I always have to, when I maintain delivery of these features, I always keep a buffer in terms of my prioritization, my team's capacity, where we are able to incorporate any enhancements that customers need. But at the same time, you may get a ton of ideas, you may get a lot of feedback from internal teams, from customers, but not everything needs to be built. Because we need to understand that everything, even a small button that you may build on a platform, costs resources, costs money, costs capacity, and it is always a trade-off. You are building something and you're trading it off with some other feature that you might have built with those resources in that capacity. So I always make sure that I am weighing my options. If I build this particular enhancement that a customer requested for, is it a recurring issue, or was it a one-off? Was it an edge case, or is this something that may impact many other customers? And then at the same time, it's also about, is it just a UI enhancement, or this is something which is going to put us in a compliance breach situation? Is it risky? How is that particular thing impacting the customer, right? And those are some of the parameters based on which I make my prioritization. It is always, I feel like prioritization is not science, it's an art. There are multiple different parameters that you have to consider, and you always need to maintain a very healthy balance between meeting enterprise priorities, meeting what your roadmap deliverables are, what you think is the next phase of your product journey, but at the same time, keeping the platform, keeping the existing product healthy, listening to customers, listening to internal teams, and balancing your capacity with making enhancements to existing and building that new.
Talk to me about when the data was indicating everything was fine, but where you believe like the customer experience was actually broken or leading to downstream effects. Like how did that, like, does that happen? Are you in a position where everything is like measured, or, which I assume it is, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, like data indicates like everything is fine, but your spidey senses are telling you there's something off. Like what happens then?
Yeah, that happens. And I think those are honestly the most difficult leadership situations to be in, because the data is technically on your side and it's telling you everything is perfect. Um, Personally, for me, my working style is very metrics driven. I like to track every data point that can impact my KPI, whether it's completion rates, it's approval of funnels, it's verification statuses, operational turnaround times, any sort of data that may inform how my KPIs work. So when something ships, a product ships or a product journey ships, and those dashboards are all green, and you should probably feel confident in that situation, right? But I have been in launches where, despite that, something just did not sit right when you look a layer deeper. For example, let's take some real life examples, right? The onboarding completion time was high, but when you look deeper into it, the customers were uploading the same documents over and over again because they were not very clear of how the document upload process works. Maybe the approval rates were very high for one of my projects that I worked on, but the servicing teams were getting constant questions. There was a spike in customer calls, and they were getting questions about why the terms of the product looked the way they did. So we did not do a very good job in communicating what should be the expected outcome if you go through this journey. So in a sense, oftentimes it happens that you have built a flow that functioned, but it was not one which reassured your customers, right? And I always say, and I'm a firm believer that the dashboards, no matter how sophisticated your dashboards are, they lag trust signals. By the time you see measurable drop-offs, confidence has usually already started to erode underneath it. And that is when the leadership judgment comes in. When you pause, you sometimes take a step back. There are times when you iterate faster to mitigate any risks, and then there are times when you work through communication layers, when you explain your product better, when you emphasize on this is what you meant and you set expectations right at the very beginning. But no matter how you solve it, you never ignore that instinct. Otherwise, it just creates experience debt that you end up paying for later.
Experience debt came up quite some time also in my past podcast. So
Yeah.
how do we measure that? How do you measure experience depth, and how do we think about resolving that? And maybe like the other question that comes to mind when we think about it is like when is it actually like still a product problem to solve, or when is it, to your point, like it's a broader experience problem and there's different stakeholders involved to actually like resolve the problem. So how do you think about experience debt, and talk to me about what is product versus what is related to experience, and when that stops being a product problem on its own?
Yeah. No, I think experience debt is a real issue that comes up in any product management journey. I strongly feel that a product decision or experience debt stops being a product problem the moment servicing teams have to compensate for it. On paper, the logic, the customer flow that I defined might work perfectly. I have the right approvals, declines, verification steps. But if a decision or a product journey starts driving repeat contacts, manual workarounds, and explanation overhead, it's no longer contained within product. It's shaping how the company overall is experienced operationally by the customer. I have, in my experience, I have seen decisions that were technically sound, but they were very difficult to navigate. Customers, while they were going through the flow, did not know what to do next. The journey was not very intuitive. How do they recover if something fails? Or if they see an error message on the screen, what do they do about it? How long the resolution is going to take was also not very clear. And that's when the issues move beyond product mechanics into experience design. That's when I have to huddle all the teams, get the right stakeholders on board, and make sure that we are taking a step back. We are looking at the product flow once more. We are trying to brainstorm, identify use edge cases where we can, so that the customers don't have the burden of evaluating or understanding or creating their own workarounds, but we are able to do it for them. Whether it's adding intuitive messaging to the platform or it's sending email campaigns to the customers explaining what we were trying to do, I think it is very important to shift that burden from the customer to the organization so that you are able to rebuild that trust. Yeah.
How do you measure what can't be measured? Like, as an example, like a lot of financial institutions have human interactions, like both 2-3 people staring at a dashboard, staring at the data, consuming the applications that you're building, making decisions on the fly. Don't even click on things, but just like use that data to inform whatever happens next. So you can't always measure like the gaps in performance that you're having, or like the flaws in the actual interface that you have, but there might be experience depth in there, right? It's like very hard to find out in some cases. It's interesting that you mentioned like it becomes a service problem then, because like that's where it shows up, right? People call the service desk or they file a ticket to raise the complaint. What are some of the ways that you're building into your teams to prevent this from happening, to flag this? Because it sounds very easy and logical when you look at it in hindsight, but often we don't know what we don't know, right? So how do you help your teams overcome or avoid this?
Yeah. So I think there are a couple of things. When I design a product or a product flow from scratch, I make sure that I am building a very robust product flow, a user flow diagram, whether it's Figma or it's anything that you use, but the user journey is very clearly mapped out from an end-to-end user journey in that sense, right? I think products mostly fail when the user flows are not defined right. You need to know how a customer is going to interact with your product from the get-go. How are they going to log in? Are there any authentication issues that they're going to face when they log into your platform? How are they going to navigate? How do they know that they should be clicking on this particular tile to, get a particular service? So I think thinking through every single edge case is very important. But to your point, oftentimes you don't know what you don't know. You cannot think through all the edge cases, and you might still run into issues at a later point. Now, there are several things that a product team does to avoid that. We make sure that we go through different levels of testing before deploying anything to customers. So we include our operations teams, we include quality assurance partners, and we as product test the flow once it's systematically designed by engineering, end to end in different environments, to debug any issues that we see. We also like to because sometimes when you are in these flows, you know exactly what you're building, right? But we try to get those fresh pair of eyes who are not that well versed with the flows to really see if they're able to understand what we were trying to pitch, what we were trying to build, right? So that is the second step. I think end-to-end testing is very important. And even when a product is deployed, I make sure that I am in tune with what the customer feedback is, what the metrics are showing. And that is when I think it's really important to not just look at the core KPIs, how much revenue you're making, how much profits you're making, how much cost you're saving, but it's really important to go into deeper engagement level KPIs. Were there any drop-offs? Were the customers clicking on the links that they were supposed to click on? For how long were the customers logged in? Did they complete the journey? Was there any drop off while they were trying to complete the journey? I think those sort of qualitative metrics inform how well the customers are engaging with the product that you built for them.
So I get it on the product side, right? On the digital side, on like the actual product flows where it
Yeah.
shows up. What about shared context across teams, like the risk teams, the compliance teams, like your design partners? Like for a lot of them, it's incredibly hard to look at like the detailed work that in the product team is happening, right? You looking at the user flows, looking at the detailed diagrams, really understanding like how you want to measure everything. So how do you build that shared context, not just once for like a specific big project? I can imagine it's like bespoke, but like how do you make sure that for all the different products that you manage, for the different capabilities that you're building, that shared context is there aligned with like the customer experience, not necessarily just with the user flow, but really like with the customer experience?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think whether it's a small enhancement that we're rolling out or it is a major project, I make sure that I have the right teams involved from the get-go. Or when an issue comes up and I'm trying to identify solutions for it, I'm brainstorming with the right compliance partners or the design partners on how to really solve for these issues. To your point, yes, it's not always a possibility to know everything, from the get-go, but I think it is always making sure that your partners are in loop. They understand what are your metrics. They understand your roadmap. They understand what you're trying to build, and they have the context of the story right. Is very important, because otherwise you're starting from the start and nobody understands what you're trying to deliver, right? And yes, oftentimes as product, we are so much into the product workflows, into the designs, in the mock-ups. We have that particular understanding, but other teams that are working with us don't. And that is why it is also a part of my core job to go on a roadshow with what I'm trying to deploy in the market for these customers. And as I mentioned, this is where financial products really vary from other products, where there are 9 different compliance teams that I work with. There is financial crimes, there's risk, there's privacy, legal teams, regulatory teams, and all of them need to weigh in. Even a small disclaimer that you add on the platform, every team needs to weigh in if that is something that's correct, or that's something, if the language needs to be tweaked, if you can use this particular word or you cannot, right? It gets monitored to that level. And I think that gives us a lot of confidence as product that what we are shipping is sound and what we're shipping is right. But it is part of my core job to really relay that story across all of these different teams in a language that they would understand, in terms of KPIs that are the most important to them. So I think understanding your audience and delivering the right message is a skill set that I've had to build through my product management journey.
If you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast channel and leave a review. It makes all the difference. The Experience Edge podcast is where I interview business leaders, CX pioneers, and the best designers who share their insight on creating business impact, having an edge on the customer experience. If you want more exclusive content and behind-the-scenes access, check out the Experience Edge podcast on YouTube and LinkedIn so you don't miss a thing. Now let's get back to the conversation. All right. What about customer experience? Should it even be a department? Is that just part of product? Is it part of the mindset? Is it even a function that we should have?
I think customer experience, in my opinion, is should be a top of mind KPI for every single team. Whether it's product, it's design, it's sales, it's marketing, I think it is all about customer experience. If the customer experience is breaking, it is on every single team that was involved in delivering a particular product. And oftentimes, we underestimate it. Oftentimes, I've seen that we would create these manual workflows and these workarounds just to prioritize speed over the customer experience. And then nobody pauses to take a look at that again, or take a step back and, oh, we needed to fix that. Or there have been times when, for a particular risk gap, we built an additional layer into the process, which puts more burden on the customers, which is all valid. Yes, you need to do that. But with time, maybe that risk gap has faded. The environment has changed. But we never took a step back to remove that additional barrier that we created in the process. And that is all experience debt, which goes unnoticed, which goes unseen. And oftentimes, I have seen companies create dedicated customer experience teams to really identify those gaps in the process. What you've delivered is optimal from a process perspective. What you've delivered is optimal from a product perspective. But in most roles that I have been on, I have not had a chance to work with a dedicated customer experience team. It's been a part of my core KPI as a product lead.
Yeah, and was it also like seen as a core KPI for the sales team, for the marketing team, for the risk team? Or was that education you had to do from a product perspective mainly?
I think it's education that I've had to do from a product perspective. Everybody knows that it needs to be their core KPI. I think, thankfully, I have had the opportunity to work with partners who, even if product experience or customer experience is not their core job, but they would always wear that hat and they would always advise that, hey, we think this could be done in a better way, or you could probably do this in an alternative fashion. And I really appreciate and welcome those conversations where I I think you cannot be rigid in your mindset as a product lead where you're building something and you think because you've defined it a certain way, it's absolutely correct. It is really important to take other teams' advice and their counsel on how you're building things. And then taking a step back and thinking if that feedback made sense and if you should be incorporating that or making any changes. I think it needs to be an iterative journey where you're continuously improving on what you built on. Um, so yes, there are times when it requires education, where I have to tell teams that, okay, you need these 500 things before I ship a product, but this is going to make the customer experience really heavy. We need to prioritize speed. We need to prioritize making it intuitive. We need it to be easier. But I have had to carve out that happy middle ground between compliance and risk controls and product experience that we would like to build.
What is the most important piece of your role? Is it like building those bridges across the silos? Or is it making sure that your team understands or your teams understand how they are making an impact on the customer experience?
I think it works in sequential order most times. If you do not have the bridges and every team is working in silos, I think that friction and that gap in customer experience would start to show pretty immediately, and customers are going to feel it. Um, to give you a real life example, at American Express, I worked on this project where we had a completely separate platform for banking, a completely separate customer platform for card experiences, and a completely separate one for business customers. So customers were logging into three different platforms, even if they owned all three products with the organization, which was creating a lot of friction. As part of one of my roles, my job was to bring all of these teams together, migrate experience to one single platform that the customers can use and they can come to and they can see all of their products in one go and manage their products, right? Now, these are the kind of projects, or even if there are multiple teams involved and you're working on one single product solution, these are the kind of situations which involve creating that bridge across multiple teams, making sure that you have set one clear North Star agenda. For example, the North Star metrics is the customer experience needs to be easy for our customer population, and they should not be making step outs to these 1,000 different platforms, but we should be creating a one-stop shop solution for them. That becomes a North Star metric. Now, no matter whether you're compliance or your risk or your privacy or your these different product teams, it should be your core KPI. It should be your most important thing, because if nobody is using these products, the engagement is low. There are compliance issues because now you're having to look at three different platforms instead of one, right? So I always try to find that common point across all teams that everybody can get behind, right? Once I have that, I start to define what would be the KPIs for these particular teams, what would be the things that would matter to them the most. I anticipate questions that they might ask me that they would care for the most. If it's marketing, they would need to know the value proposition. If it's risk, they would need to know what controls I have in place. Correct. So I think thinking through lens of these different partners, stepping into their shoes is very important as a product lead. So you're doing your job, but you're also thinking how these 10 other teams are thinking, and how do you get buy-in from all your partners early on. So that is the part where you make sure that nobody's working in silos and you are being the bridge. And simultaneously or sequentially, sometimes what follows is how their work is impacting their teams. I make sure that I'm sending out communications to each of these teams, sharing how the customer experience is impacting the customers, if it's delighting them, if there is some feedback, how we should be doing a better job. So I think thinking of things in retrospective is very important, to really identify what went well, what did not go so well, and we do that after every release to identify how can we do a better job next time.
What is interesting about these platform consolidation plays, I've seen many over the years, not just in financial services, but like in many enterprise companies, is that they're not always great for the customer. I mean, it's wonderful to think like, oh, maybe we should bring all these products under one platform, one login, and it's great. They can have all these products in one place. But I don't know, it sounds like in this case, it was very clearly a benefit to the customer as well. But in some cases, when you think about the journeys, when they're interacting with those products in their life, in their work, completing their tasks, doing what they want to do, they have nothing to do with each other. And then from a corporate perspective, consolidation makes sense, but then in the end, you're still managing 3 different things under one roof, to your point, and then it becomes additional experience depth, while you're making from a corporate perspective things more seamless, but from a customer perspective, it's just different, but the same. Was that the case in this way as well? Like, how do you make sure that this was actually aligned with what your customer wanted you to do, or like what the customer really needed?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of customer feedback. So there are multiple parameters when you do a large-scale platform consolidation, because these things often are very expensive. So there are times when the core agenda is cost saves, where you have outsourced the experience to a certain partner and you want to bring it in-house. Oftentimes it is governed by compliance and risk requirements, where you are now having customers log into a different partner's website, and now you want to do everything within the organization. Oftentimes it is because these organizations have been they're so old, they've been in business for so long. They work on a lot of legacy technology. So oftentimes you need to update technology to deliver more intuitive, better experiences. And then the customer is the king in any of these experiences. So definitely it is a lot driven by the customer feedback. So I think, again, going back to the metrics, seeing if the customer engagement is low, and then identifying why is the customer engagement low. I have been in a situation where I've actually done customer surveys to understand where is the issue. And I think that informs a lot of the business priorities. But to your point, I think you're absolutely right. Oftentimes, you do these large-scale migrations, and then you realize that the complexity has not disappeared; it's just shifted. Right. So now you're doing 3 other steps instead of doing 5 others that you were doing before. So, because I think one thing that I don't agree with, but that you have to do sometimes because of business priorities, is prioritize speed so much that you create an MVP for an MVP. And then you end up realizing that this was not the most optimal version that you wanted to build.
How is optimizing for speed going in like a large financial institution? Amex, Goldman Sachs, I mean, they're not known for speed, right? To people from the outside looking in.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think when you see from a technology standpoint, it seems like that any large organization moves at a very slow, snail speed. But I think a lot of it goes back to the point that I made earlier, that large-scale financial organizations have so much to manage from a regulatory compliance standpoint that speed can never be the top priority. However, thankfully, what I've seen at most of the teams that I worked in is that I was able to get dedicated engineering capacity. I was able to get dedicated resources. I was able to ship fast solutions to the market. And if I saw customer impact somewhere, both of these companies that I work for, they prioritize customer experience so much, and they're known for their servicing around the world, that they take customer feedback very seriously. and they do not sit on that feedback, they actually do something about it. And that is something that keeps me motivated too as a product lead, where I'm able to autonomously decide what I want to do with my product. I'm able to make decisions for my product, and I'm able to manage my own roadmap. That's the environment that I really love to work in. But to your point, like the small fintechs or like the other technology companies, I don't think that these large scale financial institutions can ever move at that speed because of all the regulatory constraints that are there.
It's almost like we need to have three buckets, right? You have experience debt, you have technical debt, and then you have regulatory debt, and then you have the whole
Yeah,
like capacity for your roadmap allocated to one of those buckets.
I agree. I agree with you for sure.
What's harder in your book? Like, let's leave the regulatory debt out of it. Like, what's harder to
Yeah,
tackle, experience debt or tech debt? Like, if you had
I think,
to choose.
yeah, I think both technical debt and experience debt are hard in their own unique, different ways. Technical debt is complex, but it's visible. You can see system constraints, you can see integrations lagging, you can see latency. And while it takes time, investment, and resources, you can usually scope it, prioritize it, and you can get it done. You can work through your way through it. Experience debt is harder in a different sense because it is, like we discussed, it's more distributed. It shows up across product design, operational guardrails, customer messaging, resolution pathways, recovery mechanisms. It is often spread across these multiple teams. So it's not just on one team as product, hey, I want to prioritize this because it touches so many different layers.
Yeah.
So there's no single place where it lives or no single place where it gets prioritized. It is also harder because customers adapt to experience debt in at some points, and that's why it never gets prioritized. For example, if my journey was not very intuitive, the customers would find workarounds. They would tolerate the friction because they have to work with that particular product, or so internally, it would never create that urgency right away, right? It's when the volumes of feedback comes is when the urgency rises, or if there's one severe escalation, the urgency would rise. But I think of it this way: technical debt slows our systems down, but experience debt slowly changes how customers feel about using our products, which is way more severe. And unwinding experience debt does not usually just require system fixes, but it requires a lot of coordination, alignment, and redesign. So, from a pure development perspective, maybe technical debt might be harder, but from an organizational perspective as a whole, I think experience debt is harder because it may cause trust deficit.
It's much harder, right? I mean, it always
Yeah,
reminds me of like the pre-internet days when we had travel agencies, and you went there to like
yeah,
find a nice destination to go to on a holiday, and then obviously the internet came along and places like Booking emerged, and then we didn't realize, but there was a big experience debt created by the
yeah,
travel agencies before, right? And it was like cumbersome processes, but it was just like the status quo, and I think like that's the key thing for experience debt. It's often not so visible. It's not so clarified because it's like lurking in the dark, and then it's there, right? It's like slowly getting
yeah.
there, and then all of a sudden it's huge. So what are some of the ways that you are defining that for your organization? Because it sounds like you have a good sense for it, but it's your experience. You are obviously a product leader, so that's also part of the role. But how do you help the rest of the organization to see it, to name it, to quantify it, to prioritize it? Like, what are the ways that you are able to make it visible to everyone?
Yeah, I think that is where the challenge comes in because of different priorities. Absolutely, as any for-profit business, every organization has revenue top of mind, and there are business priorities which are built for revenue. But at the same time, I think it's important to always, as a product lead, initiate those tough conversations where you have to look at everything that's causing experience debt. There are a few things that I do. I love to continue testing. For example, if it's a product or it's a platform, no matter what I'm managing, I love to continue testing it through and through, not just when I'm releasing something, but while if I have some free time, I would just go and I would look at it am I able to go through this journey myself? Do I really understand how it works? Do I have the right tooltips? Do I have the right messaging? Am I explaining everything right? Can I just complete this step in this particular part of the process in 4 steps instead of 8 steps? If I'm asking for 20 fields of information from you, can I explain why I'm asking that information from you? Or because those are the points where the customer start to hesitate if they do not understand why they need to provide those details to me upfront. All of these small little tiny things that you experience while you're testing your products through and through, and you need to know what you're building end to end, can help you identify experience debt. So that is the first part, which is self-awareness about and testing uh, of what you are building. Second, I love to hear customer calls sitting with my operations team side by side sometimes whenever I get a chance. I love to be looped into any escalation emails that they receive, any customer complaints. I track all of these complaints very closely so that I'm able to see where there was a point where the customer was frustrated. Currently, I'm in a B2B environment. I join my client calls, I join my client demos, and really track how their feedback was. Where is it that they asked 5 additional questions from us because they did not understand what we were presenting in our demo? That really helps. And the last thing would be metrics is, again, like we discussed, engagement metrics, drop-offs, that really inform where experience debt is forming. So that is, all of those tranches are about identifying experience debt. Now, to your point, how do you communicate it? I make sure that I maintain a robust backlog of everything that I identify along the way, which is a life sort of backlog that I'm always iterating, adding to on. I make sure that I'm carving out some capacity in every engineering release to prioritize the most crucial feedback or observation that we have made, where we can reduce the experience debt. There's a line item which is called maintaining health of the platform or maintaining health of the product. And that is a very important bucket that I'd like to keep in my team's capacity, no matter what team I'm working with. Um, and then I also make sure that I'm communicating it to every level of stakeholder, to leadership higher up, that this is where I'm using the capacity, and also to other teams that this is how we're improving on the product. Whether it's operations, it's servicing, they can set the right expectations with the customers if we get that same repeat those same repeat questions to tell them that hey, we heard your feedback and now we are improving it, and starting this date you're going to see these enhancements from us. So I think closing the loop on feedback is very important, whether it's an internal finding or it is with a customer.
So it starts with at least having allocation in your roadmap to be able to address it. Then it's on you with full autonomy, as you say, to actually like prioritize and keep like a rolling roadmap on all the potential experience that you're having. What about the bigger items that do require cross-functional investment from the different teams to make something happen? And maybe like a follow-up question to that, which I think is always fascinating, is that to get something done, usually you need to quantify it in any capacity, right? You mentioned like everything revolves around increasing revenue, but sometimes that through line, like, okay, here's experience that if we rally these 3 teams, we're able to impact revenue. Like, it sounds so simple on paper, but in reality it's really, really hard to do. So what will be ways that you overcome that, and how do you actually quantify it in line with like what the executives in your management team actually would like to prioritize, and how do you latch onto that?
Yeah, there are multiple, going back to the conversation about prioritization, there are multiple different buckets that these enhancements or these bigger initiatives fall into. The most crucial ones, and I think it is a running trade-off each time you're talking about prioritization, and I think in every company, every product team has these calls on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, whatever their cadence is. Now, anything which is impacting the customer, which is blocking the customer from using your product or using your product flow, becomes a top concern for everybody in the whether it's a senior management or it is your core partners, because there's no revenue, you're failing if your customers are blocked. So anything which is impacting the customer to a point where they're blocked from using the product, not just friction, becomes a top priority for everybody. Then, if there's anything that we identify which is a regulatory requirement or a compliance concern or anything which may put us out of compliance, becomes the second top priority. Uh, and now, talking about things which can just improve the user experience, which are driving friction, but there's a better way. You identified, me as a product lead, I identified a better way of doing certain things, but it may require cross-team collaboration. It may require more resources. It may require more money. My starting point usually is to really quantify the volumes of customers who are experiencing that friction. For example, if my, say, 200,000 customers use my platform every month, and maybe 50,000 are facing this particular edge case or it's impacting them. So that's the first volume parameter. What is the impact of this friction? Second, to really quantify the impact in a way, are what is how is it impacting them? Is it slowing them down? If it's slowing them down, are they completing the journey in 10 days, which they could have in 2 days? That means that we're slowing time to revenue, because our time to revenue has slowed down by 8 days. We could have onboarded them faster. They could have used our products faster, right? So that becomes the second metric. Then it is about saving cost for your customer service teams, right? If our customers are calling client servicing maybe 50 times in a month about the same issue, that is increasing the cost for our call centers, increasing the cost for servicing teams, where they could have used their time for something else. So that becomes a conversation about cost saves. So I think all of these qualitative matrices, at some point, they do relay to quantifiable metrics. So I think I, as a product lead, need to build that story, need to identify what is the quantifiable impact of this qualitative issue that I identified. Once I have that use business case ready, I also look at how much engineering capacity would I need? Would it be 2 sprints, 3 sprints? What would be the cost to build this? And if at all, do I have ready capacity to support, at least from our team's perspective? Or what are the dependencies that I have on other teams, and do they have ready capacity? If not, what is the other thing that I need to slow down to bring this up? And what is the trade-off? Is that other thing going to drive more benefits for the organization, more revenue for the organization, or the enhancement that I'm working on is more important? So again, I think there is no science to it. It is always an art in every situation. It depends on who are the partners that are impacted, who are the teams that are impacted, what are the dependencies, and what is the return on investment you are expecting.
I love how clearly you're laying it out, right? Going from like the amount of customers impacted and then tying that to either the cost to serve or the missed revenue because the delay of the revenue is there. Like for product leaders that do care about the broader customer experience that just touches their product, right? How would you advise them if they think that when hearing you speak, like, okay, I need to do this, I can't rely on my customer experience team to do this, or I don't have a customer experience team that is working with me, so I'm on my own? How would you advise them to get started with this if they are working, let's say, in a feature factory or in a skilled agile organization that is very customer centric on paper, but in reality is like defining priorities by whoever comes first? So how would you help them to do this? Like, what would your advice be to them?
Yeah, I think there's one word that we hear a lot, but we sometimes forget when you're working in feature factory. It's empathy, which is very important when you're building any feature or any product journey. I think it is very important to put yourself in the customer's shoes. And oftentimes we are subject matter experts in what we are doing. So we can do it in our sleep, right? We can make sense of it in our sleep, that this is what the product is, this is what you call it, this is what it's supposed to do. But as a layman who is using your products for the very first time, would they be able to understand what you're trying to do? If you can get away from a compliance regulatory perspective by collecting 5 data points, do you really need to collect 20? If you can get away with collecting 3 documents from the customer, do you really need 15 more? So how are you, I think, taking a step back and asking why at every single point would be my advice. And that is how you can build the most optimal customer experiences. If there might be leadership directives that this is how you need to do this, or this is the feature that you need to build, which is all great, and we're all doing a job and we need to do it, but you were hired for a reason. So just take a step back, look at it, and just identify, is there a better way of doing it? And how can you make it the most intuitive in the capacity that you have available? If you have to deliver the most lean MVP version, can there be fast follower enhancements that you can deliver to solve for that experience debt as fast as you can? So I think it is very, very easy to get lost in all the noise, but I think everybody who is doing a product role should take a step back and should look at the experience that they delivered.
I love that. Ashna, you were fantastic today. If people want to hear more from you or connect, what's the best place to find you?
LinkedIn, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm accessible on LinkedIn, and they can reach me there.
All right. I'll put the link to your profile in the show notes. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom on experienced debt and how to overcome it today.
Thank you so much. It was a lot of fun talking to you. This was a great podcast.
All right, and that's it. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable today, don't forget to subscribe to The Experience Edge on your favorite podcast channel, leave a review, and share it with your team. I'd be delighted. Today's episode was brought to you by Daydo, the AI journey management solution for enterprise. To have an edge on your business strategy and to know why your customers do what they do, visit daydo.com and explore more resources to accelerate your customer experience game. And remember, the journey to creating customer-centric impact never ends, and here's always a new edge to discover in doing things differently. Next week, new episode. Until then, keep pushing the edge and stay inspired. See you in the next episode.